Here we are, this lovely little church, simple little building that Father Murray had built back in 1960. He was a great lover of what he called the things that last. Anything of importance he tried to put in art. He was a tremendous lover of art. So it would either be in a bronze or it would be in stained glass. That's what he wanted. He had one description of the two windows, and he deliberately set them up in this way. So as you enter the church, on the left-hand side, these were the holy men, what he called the holy men. And on the other side here, these were the challengers, the questioners. And he loved to, to pit them together. There were elements in the lives of all of these people that he wanted his students to study and to imitate. This is our little church, and it is dedicated to Father Murray's favorite saint. His favorite saint was St. Augustine of Hippo. And over the altar here, we have a wonderful stained glass window that is dedicated to the 67 hounds that gave their lives during World War II.
Not only are these stained glass windows beautiful to the sight of the eye, but there's a story behind each person in the stained glass windows that Father Murray wanted to touch our heart, to move our heart. But Father Athol Murray had it built, and he kept it named in honor of St. Augustine. He was born in 354 in Africa, and he was in search. He was in search of kind of his place in life, the meaning of life. Why am I here? Is there a God? What's my game plan? What's my mission? He followed various philosophies, but he eventually made his way to Milan, Italy, where he encountered one of the saints. Ambrose preached the Word of God, and the Word of God convicted Augustine that he needed to pull a U-turn. And at this time, Augustine was living with a woman outside of marriage. He had a child, and if you look right above where it says in memory of 67 Notre Dame hounds, you can barely see the word veritas, which means truth. And Augustine was convicted by the truth that there's a God. So he says yes, and it doesn't lead to sorrow, it leads to excitement. But inside that again is that whole struggle and emerge experience. Not only when he converted, but then, now he's a bishop, he's a leader, he's the captain.
Here we are, Father Jim, in this St. Augustine parish, which has so many memories for you, I'm sure, and it does for me. Because I remember when I came here as a young teacher, and I saw this City of God by St. Augustine. And then, as I started to wonder about all the different personalities on the windows here, I said, what do they have to do with a Notre Dame education? Because the City of God is what Athol Murray generally tried to establish here at the campus. And all these people here are part of the citizens of the City of God in his mind. And Augustine, of course, was big in his life. It centered his life. What has that meant to you down the years?
Well, St. Augustine is a thinker, an early thinker in the church. He was very important in the history of the church. And I think for Father Murray, these things, they look rather eclectic, all these windows, but in fact they all fit together with this idea of the City of God. So we have the past, which is where we can find God, but also the present. And the present always looks so chaotic. The City of God is the presence of Christ, the church within the world. It's not something that just we look back to, we do, but only to understand where we find Christ now. And that's very much what Father Murray was all about.
All these people that you talk about here, these scholars and saints, are all part of the conversation that has gone down through the ages. and part of the heroes of the past that have kept it ever present in order to be realized.
And that's precisely what he wanted his students to become.
Yeah.
You know, people who knew the tradition. So he was schooled in the past. There's no question you had to know history. You had to know where we come from. But also people who are aware of what's going on today and can put the two together and become leaders.
He started, of course, with Gregory down here.
Yes.
So we're going to go down and look at Gregory and see his influence, and of course Leo as well, two of the early popes of the church. St. Gregory the Great and St. Leo the Great, early popes in the 5th or 6th century. And they established the ground for what they call the age of faith.
Yeah.
Can you, that's
yeah,
what I
well,
heard,
I mean, we have to remember too, the Roman Empire was really big and well organized and controlled absolutely everything, and it deteriorated, and the whole of Europe fell into chaos. And the Christian church was what became the leader. And these two popes, they were the leaders of the Christian community of the church, and they were the ones that established norms and brought civilization together, and they fought a lot of the heresies within the church and really created the church as a body that could give purpose and meaning to the European culture. And Europe has become probably the greatest culture we've ever had in civilization. And it's very much due to people like this. This was the beginning of it. There are not many popes that have the title great behind their names, but these are two of them. And that's why Father Murray picked these two to be in the windows.
So you're right, they're unbelievable heroes of the early church. Father Murray liked heroes.
He did, yeah, you know. And again, they were people who met the confusion of the present time and were able to make sense out of it and establish order, and especially see a pathway into the future and have people follow them.
And so we move up the ages here. And you have Benedict, it was part of the monastery tradition, and Francis as well. Keeping your theme of order, they found that there was a lot of disorder within monasteries, and so I know about the Benedictine rule, and I know what Francis did in terms of bringing modesty. So,
well, I think Benedict, of course, is almost at the time of Leo and just after that. And again, one has to remember the lack of culture, the lack of civilization. And Benedict established these centers of prayer and faith, and especially education. And they gave that culture, they established it firmly for the European tradition. Like most of it comes from there. The monastic movement, which Benedict started, he wrote the rule for it, men and different monasteries for women, and they really were the heartbeat of the church. Francis comes in the 12th century, when the church, you know, you have educated people and non-educated people, rich people and poor people, mostly poor people. And Francis was absolutely scandalized by that. He came from a rich family. So he went into the presence of his father and he took off all his clothes. He renounced everything he had and he lived poorly with nature. But Francis saw the unity of nature more from a spiritual and theological point of view, the beauty of it all and the importance of each element, each animal, each bird. Everything was important to him. So he lived in poverty, he lived close to the poor, and he tried to give the poor meaning and sense in their lives. And I think he succeeded very, very well.
And Francis and Benedict, of course, helped us jump to the age, the intellectual age. Now Benedict, I'm told, helped translate a lot of the Greek.
Books were not available, of course, so everything was handwritten, and they were in the monasteries, and they had the expertise and the time and the ability to translate all that stuff.
And chained.
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
You couldn't lose the books. Well, we'll move down a few more centuries. So now we're into this is the 12th century here with Aquinas and more, but he picked Aquinas, who's called the angelic doctor, and more, who I used to look at and admire so much. So we'll look into their lives a little more deeply.
Well, Thomas Aquinas, a great intellectual. Thomas was able to take all of the Greek philosophers and reread them in the light of the Christian faith. and again see what was true and real and how it helped understand the gospel and how the gospel was able to help us understand the Greeks. And be putting those two together, which is a constant work of a Christian thinker.
And so Thomas More, how does he fit into the windows here?
Well, Thomas, of course, is in a time of English history that is very difficult and very complicated. Henry VIII kind of ruling and ruthlessly without any values and things like that. And Thomas stands up to him. And because of that, of course, Thomas was beheaded and he became a martyr. But again, it's a very important thing for us to understand, like at the center of the Christian faith is the crucifixion. That truth will always be under siege, and if you want to stand up for the truth, you're going to have to suffer for it. So he's certainly, again, epitomizes what Father Murray was trying to do here at Wilcox.
As his last words were, Henry's loyal servant, but God's first.
God's first, yeah.
Yeah. A courageous man. So now we meet two desperate characters that don't really fit into the pageantry we have before. One is Jean de Brebeuf, who was a Canadian martyr, and he said one of the hardest things of moving with the First Nations, as he did, was in the cold. He says, in the front you were burning, in the back you were freezing as you were sitting in front of the fire. In any case, Brebeuf and the reason Athelmurray might have been interested in him.
Well, when Father Murray was first ordained, he was in the Archdiocese of Toronto, and in fact he was a curate. They were beginning the shrine at Midland at the time, and Athel was deeply involved in all of that. They were doing research and searching for relics and stuff like that, and it's difficult these days to kind of figure out all of this, you know, the whole question of did we take the culture away? Did we try to, enculturate the faith? I think they did. They lived with them, you know, and they tried to see the connection between the two. You know, it was done on a very small scale, but then, of course, things got larger and larger, and then you lose a lot of those niceties, and you begin to be pushing and shoving, and that's we got to where we are now.
Interesting.
Yeah. And Newman, you know, I think the big thing, again, you have a fellow who is both a saint, and he's just been declared a saint by the church recently, but he's a man of great moral uprightness and of great intellect. I think Newman is a perfect example of that. You know, he followed his conscience. You know, he was an upper-class Englishman, and to become a convert to Catholicism, that was a big, big step for him socially and in every other way, but that's where his conscience led him. And then within the church, he flourished as a teacher and a leader and a doctor of the church, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, he's an eminent man. And so it's combining a very personal faith with a very, very strong intellectual tradition. Put those two together.
And of course he had a tremendous capacity for friendship. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why he kept so many friends on all sides of the equation, because he heart spoke to heart as well, not only with his personal relationship with Christ, but also in terms of friendship with others. If you look at Laval, it says Canada and Laval. Laval was sent over, and that's when the French really said we're going to take a real interest in Canada. At that time, before that, it was kind of a land of snow and ice. And I know when and he tried to make sure that the work with the First Nations was done justly. And not only that, he actually threatened to excommunicate the fur traders that brought liquor. He's the first rector of a university in Canada, and so why would Athelmurray consider him here? He had the rector, he had the church in Laval today, which is a famous university, and Athelmurray went to Laval as well. So in any case, he was prominent. Athelmurray went to Laval.
Yeah, and he was the first bishop of Canada.
Of Canada, yes, as well.
The bishop of Quebec, and therefore established the church as an organization within this new country. And again, it's hard to imagine what things would have been like in those days, very primitive and
man.
not much communication. And but he did it, and you know, we're still going. And much of that, I think, is due to the leadership that Laval and the vision that Laval provided.
Initiated, yes, indeed.
Leo the 13th is a most interesting man. He came to the throne of Peter. He became Pope, just at the height of the Industrial Revolution. And what is so fascinating about Leo is he brought the light of the gospel to that particular situation. He talked about labor unions and about freedom and about all kinds of things that we take for granted today, but we're not there at all. The dignity of human beings, the dignity of work. Again, on the basis of the church. Confronting the difficulty of the time, but seeing that there's good things in that, and the way that this can surface is through the mediation of the gospel. And the social teaching of Leo the 13th is still relevant today.
With Henry Newman, he made him a cardinal.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
reinstated him into the, not reinstated him,
Yeah.
but gave him the prominence
Yeah.
in the church that he deserved because of his theology and his intellect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go on. So here we have Mercier and Chesterton. And Mercier has a connection to Leo the 13th because they were trying to meet the practical ideas of the Industrial Revolution. Mercier was looking at the intellectual side of it. How do we handle the intellectual side? Because this was the time of Darwin and other, they would call positivists, ones that said there was no truth outside of scientific fact. And so Mercier started the school at Louvain with Thomism.
But Mercier, I think, and his influence had a lot to do with the intellectual formation that took place in seminaries and all over the world.
Yes.
All over the world, especially bringing Thomas Aquinas in again updated, you know, given the modern age and all of that. But that was very important. He's a giant from that point of view.
Chesterton, of course, was a writer, an English writer, a convert as well. He was prominent during the First World War. And of course, he went after Hitler right from the beginning for his racism. Yeah, interesting character. I mean, two of his great books, I guess, The Everlasting Man and Orthodoxy were two of his.
Yeah.
And so he was really pointing back, you do need a center for intellectual thought. And he was pointing back to the church as that center. Yeah.
But again, what a wonderful combination of deep Christian faith and intellect. Like he could counter anything that people were talking about, understand it and absorb it and retort, you know, and not fighting, but trying to understand it. He gave great leadership.
All the particular scholars that we meet from this point on really followed including Chesterton, followed the Industrial Revolution. And how do we meet the fact that we're losing our sense of moral direction? And Belloc, of course, he was a historian. He was born in France. He came to Europe, he got elected to Parliament, and he pointed out that Europe is really centered in the Christian faith and philosophy. And so he brought that association into a real depth. So these fellows are characters as well as outstanding scholars.
Yeah, and again, committed believers. You know, and this was always important in the city of God and in Notre Dame. You know, you had to be a person of moral principles, a strong person, but also open to what's going on.
Absolutely. And Jacques Maritain from France, well educated, he took Thomism to a different level. The skepticism of the philosophical world that was rampant in France and also in Western Europe. And Thomism was the answer. Through conversation and work and effort, come to the truth of how you should live.
Yeah.
His wife, Raisa, who was a scholar in her own right, very well, and then after she died, he went to a little monastery on the river Garonne, and he's written a book called The Peasant of the Garonne. And of course, he didn't like much the new changes in the church, you know, at the time. But I mean, that's the kind of conversation that goes on back and forth. And he was a big part of meeting the skepticism of the 19th and 20th century.
Yeah, he was very much part of my philosophical education in Ottawa. We used Maritain an awful lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the English tradition was really important in bringing the Catholic philosophical part of its faith up to snuff. And Ronald Knox was more a part of it with the Bible. Jim used to tell me that Athol Murray, at the end of his session with his graduates, would give all his students, at least when Jim was a student there, one of the Bibles of Ronald Knox.
And he translated the Bible from the original, from Latin, into an English that was, acceptable to people. People could understand it, so you could read the Bible and get something out of it. So that was very important. And through Ronald Knox, the movement to sort of read the Bible and become more and more exposed to the beauty and the importance and the richness of the Bible, and that's really important today. So he's been a great influence.
Gilson, on the other hand, another French scholar,
Thomist,
a Thomist as well, and he and Maritain had a similar approach. They both used Thomism as their base. He fought in the First World War, was captured, and he was in a concentration camp in Germany for 3 years. And while he was there, he took up medieval history. It led to him writing a biography of Thomas Aquinas, St. Boniface, St. Anselm, and St. Benedict. He wrote 5 biographies from the Middle Ages. The other one I have right here is The Terrors of the Year 2000, which I've had this since 1964. And you see it now. You see it now with facial recognition. They've got these concentration camps. And so the terrors of the year 2000 or the 21st century is going to be the possibility, which is happening in many places, of a concentration camp state.
Well, like China, my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean,
And,
I wonder what Father Murray would think of all of this. You know, he's gone for about 30 years now, and I mean, the world has changed so much, and I mean, he would have to grapple. Yeah, of course, he'd be able to do it because he did it all his life, but it would be interesting to see that.
And that's why I was thinking here, just as we're going through the windows, like the conversation is ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
Who is meeting it now? We still have room at the back and at the side. Who are the great Catholic thinkers that can meet the world we live in today? Yeah. And we haven't got them up yet.
No.
So I'm going to leave that up to you. Our final windows deal with Henry Carr and Christopher Dawson. But I knew Henry Carr. I knew him personally because he was out at St. Mark's College. At St. Mike's, what you don't know about Henry Carr is he started the hockey program at St. Michael's College.
Yeah, so you can see the affinity between him and Father Murray, and why this window would be here for sure.
Yes.
Both the intellectual and the sports, and I mean, it all makes sense, yeah.
In any case, he started these colleges right across Canada, and he had a personality that he was able to engage people. When Henry Carr was being recognized for his great work in education, Athol Murray stands up. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen," he says, I want Gilson to move over. Maritain, move over," he said. "Here we got Carr of the St. Michael's Institute." So he told all these great scholars to move over. We're going to recognize Carr tonight, much to Carr's immense embarrassment, as you can imagine. Dawson, he was the one who suggested. Do you know much about Dawson?
Not a huge amount. Yeah. I know he really kind of was a combative guy, again, with the culture, with the science, and all these things, you know, that were becoming very positivistic, to see something deeper in all of that. Yeah.
So he was a great European historian. He became a Catholic, and so, as you know, to become a Catholic in England at the time was to make you an outcast. Yeah. So he never did get a position in university, but he was brought over to Harvard I think it's called the Stillman Lectures. He became the chair of Catholic Studies at Harvard for a period of 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's how I got to know all these beasts. I was a hockey coach, you know. I wasn't a hockey player, I wasn't a scholar. But I knew how important they were in setting the ground for a philosophical approach to how we ought to live.
This beautiful stained glass window of Our Lady, Notre Dame. So for those who don't know, Notre Dame, as we call it, Notre Dame from the French, means Our Lady. But I'm going to focus on this beautiful stained glass window called the Magnificat. In Luke chapter 1, the angel Gabriel appears to her and says, hey, hail full of grace, the Lord is with you. Guess what? You're about to become pregnant. You know, the power of the Holy Spirit is going to overshadow you. And Mary's response is, yes, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to your word. She says yes. And that is the key, because every single one of us are going to get shoulder tapped by our God throughout our lives. And he gives us the free choice to say yes or no. But she says yes to God's game plan. So it's an act of faith and it's an act of humility, but it's also that beautiful act, that beautiful yes, takes her out of herself and moves her closer to God. And that's going to be the challenge all of us are going to be invited or proposed. After she's pregnant, she goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who's pregnant with John the Baptist. And then Elizabeth confirms, hey, you know, the mother of my Lord, why would you come and visit me? So Elizabeth confirms the fact that Mary has conceived God in her womb, which is a miracle in itself. And Mary's response to that is what we call the Magnificat. She says, my soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord, and my spirit exalts or rejoices in God my Savior. And I think the biggest fear for humans is if we say yes to God's game plan for our lives, we think it's going to lead to misery, but it's the exact opposite. It leads to joy. Is it an easy life? No way. But her yes leads to joy. And hounds, all of us are faced with those moments when we can say yes or no. But I think the thing Athol Murray wanted us to realize is when we say yes, the end result is joy despite the hardship. And we turn to the story in the book of Genesis where Jacob, one of the patriarchs, anyway, he's wrestling with the angel. And it captures, again, that struggle, that agonizing part of our lives where we struggle, okay? And it's painful because the answer doesn't come clear. It doesn't hit us like a thunderbolt. And boom, there it is. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it's an interior struggle. And so this stained glass window, Jacob struggling with the angel, depicts our own interior struggle with, you know, what's my plan in life? What's my purpose in life? How do I be happy? What's my next step? You know, after my basketball career, my junior A career here, what's next in line? What's going to make me happy? What's going to fulfill me in life? And again, it's a journey, it's a struggle, and we all wrestle with God's will. So again, life's not easy here. But Struggle and Emerge is a beautiful model that not only captures who we are, captures who the college is, but it also captures, again, the inescapable tradition of Western Christian civilization.
And I think that's really the background of all the windows in here.
Yes, and the kind of vision that Father Murray and hopefully what the college is trying to do today, to maintain that same sort of position and the challenge that's in front of us all. It's a very, very big challenge, but all of these people, it was a challenge too, and they stood up to the challenge, and we remember them for that, so we hope that it continues to go on here.
That was really his
and
goal.
not feed them too much.
No, he didn't. And so this is the legacy Athol Murray wanted to leave, and really it's needed more today than it was in even Athol Murray's time. I think to keep the conversation going, to keep the liberal arts going, to make good people before you train good technicians is really essential, and that's the whole part of liberal arts education.